Well, hello, Manchester, Auburn, Hooksett. This is the Progress Report. This is the last Wednesday in the month of May. We're about to transition into the month of June 2017. And there are two interesting 50-year events that we want to talk about. One of them particularly tonight, maybe another one another time. The much happier one was the release of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
Certainly, I have
my choice for the greatest rock album of all time. Others may have different opinions.
Well, I think it was pivotal, Bob. I think you can judge pop music from before Sgt. Pepper's and after Sgt. Pepper's.
It was a landmark event.
I had the album. I remember when it came out.
But we're going to talk about another 50th anniversary that's much grimmer, not so upbeat, and that is
and probably to some folks maybe a little forgotten. I think maybe
much more forgotten than the Beatles, because we still have Sir Paul with us, and still doing some great music and writing wonderful things. But we have today Bill McCarthy to talk with us about a much grimmer 50th anniversary coming up, and that is the savage, devastating attack on a U.S. naval vessel in the Eastern Mediterranean. Not by Syria, not by Egypt, but by our biggest ally in that part of the world, Israel, in June 8th of 1967.
A week away.
With just a week away, and we have a citizen of Manchester who's really made this memorial of what happened to these American sailors and the heroism that they displayed in this devastating attack with us. And Bill McCarthy, who's an activist for peace. He's let's see, Bill. You used to be hosting your own program called Veterans for Peace, and you are indeed a veteran of the U.S. Navy. And
I'm a veteran of the U.S. Navy, yep.
And with many distinguished areas of service.
I'm a retired lieutenant commander, and I was an intelligence officer.
Yeah.
In the same business as the people on the Liberty were.
And a Russian linguist.
A Russian linguist, yes.
And retired as a lieutenant commander with 10 years of active duty at NSA.
Yep.
And various submarine and aircraft in the frontline collection of intelligence. Member of the Jewish Voice for Peace.
I am.
That's very good.
Yeah.
And Veterans for Peace. Has served his community as a state senator.
Yep.
High-paid job. We appreciate that.
That's true.
And 4-term rep with a term on the Manchester School Board.
I did. During which we picked Henry McLaughlin to become superintendent. So I guess I could retire after that.
And now he's got a school named after him.
It was done.
So, a guy who's made a real contribution to our country and our state and our city. And we're glad to have him with us to talk about this, and we're going to get on to it. But before that...
But first, as we sometimes do, we will have this week's edition of the POTUS Report on the Progress Report. And I'll keep it short and sweet. I haven't been here for a couple weeks. A lot has happened. I started by thinking back, okay, where were we when I was last on the show? And there's just, I think I compared it to trying to take a sip from a fire hydrant, when you're trying to keep track of what's going on. And John McCain's wonderful analogy, it's like waiting for the other shoe to drop with a centipede. I love that one. That's a good one. Just a reminder of where we were last time. But I've got just 3 quick reports, more focused on what's going on, not on the controversy, not on the big major news headlines, but some more minor things. One of them, which might seem to be a minor thing, is apparently, and I kind of wish maybe we had Katy Perry's song "Call Me Maybe" playing in the background here. The president's handing out his phone number. He's giving out the digits to foreign heads of state, and apparently it's a personal unsecured cell phone that he's giving the phone numbers to, and this includes several foreign heads of state, and it is reported that on at least one occasion, French President Emmanuel Macron actually called the cell phone to talk to Trump, so it's actually being used. I mean, this is 2 heads of state speaking on a completely unsecured line, and I guess I would say we can only imagine that French intelligence might also be monitoring that phone number. I don't know if this is a major thing or a minor thing. I find it to be astounding, and we'll just leave it at that. My next report is on international tourism to the United States declining. U.S. market share of international tourism is down 16% since October, according to Foursquare, a location data company. And they've used data from 13 million users to come to that conclusion. U.S. News and World Report has published a story indicating that bookings from Mexico have declined from 10 to 15%, and from the Middle East, tourist bookings to the United States have declined from 20 to 25%. Some people may say that's great. You know, I'm not so sure it is. The international trade industry is enormous in the United States of America. We are a destination for people from all over the world, for our natural beauty, for our historical points of interest. And we have a trade surplus in international tourism of $87 billion. So let's attack that industry.
Yeah, let's attack that industry.
And finally, and this is something this news broke this afternoon. CNN is reporting reporting today that fired FBI Director James Comey will testify publicly before Congress, and they specifically report he is ready and willing to discuss his conversations with the president concerning changes or stopping the inquiries into the Russian matter. So that's something he may testify. It's going to be in public. He may testify as early as next Wednesday, and I have to think that all the channels will probably be covering that hearing.
I would think they would be.
And that concludes this week's edition of the POTUS Report and the Progress Report.
I would just add a quick postscript that apparently Trump is going to carry out with his what I would consider his threat or his promise to take us out of the Paris Climate Accords, where 195 nations have agreed to pursue policies to deal with climate change and the threat of rising seas and melting glaciers and all the things we're seeing already.
That's the reporting.
That's the reporting.
That's the reporting. But from what I'm hearing, there is a lot of discussion going on within the administration. There are certain very influential people, including Tillerson, who are in favor of staying with the accords. And Bob, the good news is it's not the end of the world. It's only the United States not voluntarily staying with these accords. The other nations of the world are sticking with it, and all is not lost.
Well, I do think that the climate issue could be the end of the world as we know it, so, whatever. Okay, I have one promo I want to get to, but I'll save that because, Bill, we got a lot to get to, and you're an expert on this, and we're certainly glad to have you here.
Okay, I just want to thank you very much for giving me the chance to come down here and discuss a little bit about the Liberty, because so few people know about it at all. And to be quite honest with the audience, and with you, Bob, I'm up front. Honest Bill, they called me, right? Before the show, I had a little talk with Bob Backus himself and explained to him what I was going to be talking about. And he looked at me askance and said, can you find any reliable, credible Navy experienced person who would agree that Israel intentionally wanted to sink that ship? So I gave him a copy of a book that I have, which was written by the officer of the deck of the assault on the Liberty, and the foreword of it is by Admiral Thomas Moore. He was the chief of naval operations when I was on active duty, later became chief of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And Bob read it quickly, as he's a lawyer can do, and I think he agrees now that he says it was done intentionally. But Bob's position is, but why did they do it? Now we're to the point, not that they did it or didn't do it. They did it, but why did they do it? And he's uncomfortable with that because he doesn't have the answer to why did they do it. And there's been many postulations speculated, but we really don't know.
Well, we've got a 1-hour show, and you've brought us right to the end of the show.
Yeah?
I think we need to go back because I certainly think that
you know, and I happen to know because I remember discussing with you years ago at a rally here in Manchester for
this is getting good.
Former Senator Edwards, who was a vice presidential candidate.
That's right.
And you mentioned this, and I said, I know about the USS
You
Liberty.
did.
But I don't know as much about it as you do, and I'm sure many of our viewers don't know anything about it.
Yeah, we got to go. We got to go
wasn't
back
this the most devastating attack on a U.S. naval vessel since World War II?
Yeah, and the most highly decorated vessel for any one instrument. The people on it were heroes. That's why I wanted to be here, and I do thank you very much because they don't get a chance to tell the story anyplace. But if I could just explain a little bit what the USS Liberty, what it's all about.
We're talking 50 years ago.
We're talking 50 years ago in a week.
1967.
Tell us about the USS Liberty.
All right,
Where
the
it was-
USS
where-
Liberty-
What it was and what it was doing.
Okay, the USS Liberty was a converted big ship, 450 feet. It's a converted from World War II. NSA, National
It was
Security
a
Agency.
victory ship. It was
and
one
a
of the
victory
ships
ship,
that
I
was
think.
used during World War II to ship
Exactly,
supplies to Europe.
exactly, yeah. They used them on the early warning. But they were, NSA and the Navy higher-ups in the intelligence, I was an intelligence officer, but not that high up, dreamed this up because they saw the Russians were using fishing vessels doing it. Say, why don't we do the same thing? Get some of our old vessels.
I can
and let them-
remember as a kid,
So
you would hear on the news, a Russian fishing trawler was
Absolutely,
seen
right
off
off
the
of
coast
Guam.
of Maine,
Yeah, right off of Guam, too, letting them know every time the planes were coming. And so they converted 4 ships as large as the Liberty, the Oxford, and I forget and 2 smaller ones, right? The Banner and her more famous ship, the Pueblo, which also got captured by the North Koreans. But that's where it came from. It's a joint venture, and because it's a joint venture like that, and the Navy doesn't really it's not the traditional promotion route for the Navy officers and so forth, they don't really want to get involved in that type
So
of ship.
this is a backwater
It's
as
a
far
backwater
as
type
your
thing
career
as
would go.
your career goes, exactly right. And because of that, it falls right out of the Navy's view. When the Pueblo, for instance, I just mentioned above, we don't want to get onto it, but they don't have an operational commander like Commander 6th Fleet or Commander 7th Fleet or 5th Fleet, whatever it is, right? Like the Pueblo got nailed, they were under Commander Naval Forces Japan, which has the Navy exchanges, the housing, hospitals, and stuff like that. No operational control. Submarines who operate always come under, because they're in the right path of promotion, and they're always under an operational control, a sought position. So
So
a ship
when you
like
say
that,
operational control, what we're talking about is the muscle of the Navy.
the muscle,
combat vessels.
and the promotion track too, obviously. you
Okay,
know.
now there's other-
And these guys are not in that group. These guys are kind of someplace. So obviously, we had 2 aircraft carriers, I think, and they met at the time, and I don't think either one of them knew that the Liberty was sitting off the coast or if there was any problem at all until a critical message came out asking for help. But they up to that point, I don't think they know. They just operate on their own.
Well, we're getting ahead even more, but
Yep.
there was a point where they asked for assistance, and now
Well, that's it.
let's go back. I want to start at the beginning here because
Yeah, let's do it.
I remember the news reports of this attack as a kid, but I was a kid, so I didn't really understand what was going on. So I've had to do some homework to get ready for this show, and this
Yeah,
is
you
a
did.
fascinating story.
Yeah, you did good too.
Thank you.
Take
So,
care.
so I want to start at the beginning. We have this refitted old Liberty
With
ship,
all the latest electronic and
it-
communications,
but this is a
intercept type stuff.
high-tech vessel. It's an
Very
important
high-tech.
vessel to the
Yeah.
United States.
But importantly, no defensive armament. Didn't carry any guns.
Yeah, I think it had a
They had
small.
guns, but no cannons.
I think they had like maybe a 40 millimeter way up front or something, maybe to ward off a pirate or something like that. But they never.
It
they
wasn't
could
a-
not shoot down a plane or attack a ship or anything.
It wasn't a
and
combat
they didn't,
vessel.
And they didn't. No, it was not a combat.
And it-
basically unarmed. Basically unarmed. Yeah.
And what's it doing? It's out there in the Mediterranean. And
It wasn't. It
it's-
was off the coast of Africa. And because of the communications pickup that NSA had and so forth, there was a lot of stuff going on in the Middle East. So they detached the ship from Africa, sent it over to international waters off of Egypt and Israel to listen to see what the heck was going on. And you can hear, you can find out an awful lot just by listening. You don't even, if you know what's going on, you know when tank groups are coming up, for instance, there's a lot of communication. A lot of it's manual Morse and stuff like that, and not plain English, but you can tell something's happening. So they were there,
So
ready
they were
to see.
a spy ship,
Our spy
and
ship,
we're
yeah.
acknowledging that now. And
Yeah.
so they moved from the Western Mediterranean closer to Egypt and Israel.
No, they were in the Atlantic Ocean, off of Africa,
okay.
down off of
So they come into the
Africa.
Mediterranean, and they move in right between 2 really good friendly nations, Egypt and Israel,
Yeah.
who are not on friendly terms. I was being facetious. Right at the moment that war erupts.
Wouldn't be a good time to be there, see what's going on, right? Because I think the implication, most people thought that Israel was standing down, that Egypt was the one getting up. We wanted to know probably who was it, who is doing something here, right? And I guess now maybe we knew who was doing
So
something. all the
there
time.
they are, and
And they're our ally.
the war erupts. Right? I mean,
Yeah,
we're right at the 6-day war. Correct?
it happens just around that time. Yeah, I don't know if it's that day or the day after. Or,
And folks, just to set the scene here, The Six-Day War in 1967 was the war in which Israel reoccupied the entirety of Jerusalem, a sacred city to three religions, which had been a divided city, just like Berlin had been.
Right.
With a instead of the
Under the
Checkpoint
original-
Charlie, they had Mandelbaum Gate. I went through there as a kid, and they occupied the entire of the West Bank,
Yep.
which had been part of the Kingdom of Jordan, and also acquired the Sinai from Egypt, which eventually they did return.
And the
So
Golan
this-
Heights from Syria.
And Golan Heights from
So
Syria.
this is
Yeah.
this is the
This is
war
the war
where
that
they-
enlarged Israel's territorial
the boundaries.
control
They were still
way
arguing
beyond
about.
the territories
Yeah,
that were set
right.
in 1948 when the War of Independence occurred.
And
So
I
I
think
just-
President Obama wants them to go back to the 67 boundaries.
Yeah,
Is that
with-
part
with-
of the
with-
issue, right? Isn't it part of the issue now?
Well, not
It's-
anymore.
it's-
He's
No,
not
it
the
was,
president.
though. It
Well,
was,
The
right?
UN has long called for return to the 67 boundaries with some appropriate exchanges
Yeah,
for security.
right, yeah.
And no sign
But that's
that
when it
that's
all
gonna-
happened,
no
at
sign
this
that that's
time,
going to happen.
at this time. So.
But this
it's-
is the context in which the
So,
liberty
and
is
that's
set.
why I'm bringing this up,
Yeah.
because you have Israel and you have Egypt, and they're staring down each other's gun barrels. So,
Well, I don't know. Israel wiped out the whole Air Force. The whole Air Force was on the ground. I don't know how active they were, and they wiped the whole thing out because they were all on the ground, right?
Yeah.
They wiped out the whole Air Force.
Yeah.
So I think it was a sneak attack. Obviously, it was a sneak attack. That
Well,
nobody
they
expected it.
thought the Israelis-
And I
the
think we
Egyptians were
wanted to
about
know
to
what
attack
was
them.
going on. That's why our ship was there.
so the
to see
so,
if they could
so
figure
the
out
ship
what was going
sails
on.
to within 70 miles of the coast.
I don't know. You've got that information. I thought they could be closer than that, but I
Now,
don't
that's
know.
you know,
You can
I
go,
wasn't
you
there
can-
either. So
you can go into 12 miles. International law said to
Yeah.
go into 12.
So they were
would
in
definitely be
international
out. They
waters.
would
They were
definitely
more
be
than
out.
12 miles away from any
They would be
any-
definitely
any
more than
territorial
12
waters.
miles. Definitely more than 12 miles out.
And-
yeah.
and what
And
I-
more likely they would be 30, 40, 50, whatever you said.
And what
More
I
likely
read
they would be.
was, then there are reports of a town on the coast being shelled.
Yeah.
Now, of course, it couldn't have been the ship because it didn't have the armament to shell
Oh,
anything.
that's a
It
good
didn't-
point,
It
yeah.
didn't have
Yeah.
that kind of armament.
Yeah, just-
But that gets the attention of the Israelis, and they send scout planes out to see what's out there.
Yeah. But they had already identified the ship from the first day the ship got there. They flew over the ship several times, tipped their wings. The crew waved up to them, and they had
Yeah, I
the
saw it.
Star of David symbols on it. So they're our allies. So they did it several days in a row. You know, they knew what ship
And
it
it's
was.
marked.
And
They did.
tell
they
us
did-
about the markings on the ship. How was the ship identified as a U.S. naval
Why don't we
vessel?
put the first picture up? We can take
How-
a look at
oh.
it.
Let's do that. Let's do that. Can we get the first
Bob,
picture?
if you can find that first picture, that'll show us what the markings are. We can talk about them.
It's a real good idea. There it is. This is
Yeah.
the USS Liberty
And that's when it's in good
in
shape.
its pre-damaged state.
Right. That's excellent. Yeah.
Now, at this point, I don't
It
see
says GTR 5 up on the bow. Those
yeah,
are the bow
I don't
markings.
happen to see an American flag on there, but I presume that
No,
was...
that's not on this mission. I mean, that's when they got underway or
yeah,
something.
yeah.
But I
That's
would
all.
point
you
out
can see all the antennas.
something that
And the GTR is a giveaway. The GTR, that's U.S. Navy ships. That's written in our alphabet and everything.
Egyptian
That
ships
was-
would have had
They
the
later said
Egyptian,
CT,
the
yeah.
Arabic.
It would have been in Arabic.
The-
and if
the
it had been
Arabic
Israeli, it would have been
figures.
in
Yeah,
Hebrew. But
yeah.
yeah, this
Yeah.
is definitely...
No, they definitely identified the ship, as Admiral Moore says, you know. And
So
then-
this ship is told to go somewhere near
Yeah, where
Israel
they
and
can pick
Egypt,
up
but
communications.
not within territorial waters, to stay in international
Yep.
waters,
Yep.
and then tell us what happens next.
Well, what happened next is just by
And
big
after several days of flybys and
flybys and everything, yeah, the officer of the deck, Jim Ennis, who I don't know if they can see this book. Jim Ennis was the officer of the deck at the time, and he ended up writing this book, which is kind of the charter book of anybody who knows anything about the Liberty. And they came out with napalm and shot napalm started fires on the ship. He got blown off the deck, and he ended up in sick bay down in the wardroom and everything. And then some other fighter planes came in, shelling the ship and stuff. And these were our friends. Everybody was getting killed, running around. There's pictures in the book that's terrible. And later on in the day, there's the two I think maybe more than two or three torpedo boats came out. So it's kind of, people think it's a coordinated attack by the Israeli Defense Forces, and some people think Moshe Dayan, but who knows? We don't know the whole story. But the torpedo boats seemed to know exactly what they were doing, because they launched their torpedoes, and I think 2 or 3 hit. But the most important one that hit right in the space where the so-called spooks, the communications technicians, the guys that I worked with when I was on active duty, that's where they were, right in there. All the listening positions were there, the manual Morse, the voice communications and everything were right there. Most of the people that got killed were communications technicians. 34 sailors got killed that day, and 171 were wounded. And by wounded, I mean seriously wounded. And the captain somehow was able to get that ship all the way up to Malta, and he pulled it into, and that's not one of our U.S. bases, but it was an ally, England, I guess. And he got it up to Malta. They took the corpses off. They took all the rest of them, and they put them in, a lot of them ended up in the hospital in Naples, but every single crewman on the ship was interviewed and told that if they talked to their family about this, if they talked to the press about this, if they mentioned anything about this at all, they would not only lose their pension and benefits in the Navy, they would very likely end up in Leavenworth Federal Prison. And they were all shaken down and scared, and Admiral McCain was the one in charge of the Board of Inquiry. Admiral Isaac Kidd was his chief of staff. He was the one that went down there and gave them that good news that they better not talk to anybody
Well, with that,
about
I
it.
think that's a good place that we can take a break, because we're at the point where we need to take our break on the show.
Okay,
So, Paul, give us 30 seconds. We'll be right back.
we'll be right back, and call in if you were interested in talking with Bill McCarthy about this disastrous event for our U.S. Naval Forces 50 years ago in a week. We'll be right back.
I was telling
Hello, everybody. This is the last progress report for this month. Wednesday, as always.
Jeez, I thought you were retiring, Bob. Scared me. My career, it's over.
No, that day is going to come into view sometime not too far off. Oh, we have a caller on line one.
Yeah, why don't we
Let's,
take the call, Bob?
Yeah. Hi, Roland. Are you with us?
Hi, Roland. You're on the progress report.
Hello there.
You there, Roland? You're on the air live.
Yeah, I'd like to say hello to Bill, please.
Sure,
You
by
may.
all means. The
We're-
floor is yours.
Go right ahead.
Hi, Bill.
Who's this?
It's Roland.
Oh, Roland. Yeah, hi, Roland.
Hi, Bill. Yeah, I just wanted to say hi to you. I'm just watching the show. I just wanted to change the subject for a minute, but do you remember who I was?
No, not off the top of my head.
Oh, we gotta do a game
I should know though, Roland. Yeah, did you?
You were running for Alderman.
Absolutely, I do. Yeah, you ran the vehicle for the Elliott and everything. One of the nicest people I've ever met, actually. You live down on Lake Avenue. You live down on Lake
I
Avenue.
still do that.
And you still do that? And you used to be
Yes, sir.
friend.
Yeah,
Yeah.
34 years.
Wow. No, I thank you very much, though. You still living down there?
No, I'm living in West Philly now, up on Taylor Street.
Oh, yeah. Well, geez, it's great for you to call. I've often wondered about, where people go after, but thank
Well, I
you.
just wanted to call and say hello, and it was nice to see you on the show.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Thanks
Thanks
for
for the
calling,
call, Roland.
And I'm sure Bill
you.
appreciated that, too.
I do.
Okay, that's good, but now we want to get back to this dramatic story of what happened to the USS Liberty just about 50 years ago, well, exactly 50 years ago next week, in the Eastern Mediterranean in the context of the Six-Day War between Israel and Egypt and Jordan and
So
Syria.
we've got this surveillance vessel, comes into the Mediterranean from off the coast of Africa and the Atlantic, minding its own business, doing its spy thing, and all of a sudden, unprovoked, and it couldn't have provoked anything, it didn't have any
No.
weapons, it gets attacked. And beat up pretty good. 34 casualties, over
34 fatalities.
fatalities, and over 100 seriously wounded.
171.
Makes its way back. And by the way, I want to point out, you didn't mention that the commander of this ship was shot in the leg in the first attack, the first wave of attack.
Yeah.
So all the work that he did to keep that ship afloat and
Did with a
he
one
did
leg.
it with some serious injuries. A pretty heroic guy. I was very impressed when I was reading the story of this. So they get back to Malta. And, the men are in the hospital, the ship is being repaired, and the folks from Washington come down and say, you guys better keep your mouth shut.
No, they came from London.
Okay,
Yeah,
fair enough.
John McCain's father was the commander of the Navy in
kidding.
Europe, and he detached Admiral Isaac Kidd, who was his chief
An
of
admiral.
staff.
So these are
An
serious
admiral,
guys,
yeah.
though.
He
John
sent
McCain's
the
father
admiral
was a
down.
distinguished admiral from combat in the Pacific in World War II, commanding a
Isaac Kidd.
fast carrier task force.
Isaac Kidd.
Yeah.
Well, what I want to
But
ask
we,
is,
we have another call, too.
Well,
We're gonna get to it, but go ahead.
Phil will be with you 1 second. I want to ask a quick question. What is so surprising that the government, the military, would want the crew of a spy ship to be quiet about an incident involving a spy ship?
Because
it's a spy ship.
Because it's a cover-up. It's been a super cover-up right from day one. Because as LBJ is reputed to have said, right, I'm not going to start an international crisis with my ally for a bunch of sailors, right?
now
Israel
we're
was a
getting
hell of
into
a
the
lot.
meat and potatoes of the
Israel
story.
was a hell of a lot more important than these sailors are and everything. And as Admiral Moore says, he says that if they decide to put Israel ahead of the United States in this instance, how do you know if they're not putting Israel ahead of us in a lot of other instances too? And you do have to kind of wonder.
Yeah, okay. Right here, I want to make a disclaimer that you and I talked about at the beginning.
Yeah.
You've been critical, and I would be critical of some of the government policies of the State of Israel. I don't want to be accused of being an anti-Semite because of that, and I know you don't either.
No, I don't.
I mean, you said you're a part of the
I am a member of the Jewish Voice for
Voice
Peace.
for Peace.
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
And, don't call in and accuse us of being anti-Semite because we're telling you the facts about the devastating attack on a American naval vessel without the ability to defend itself in international waters by forces of the Israeli Defense Forces, both air and sea. We don't want to hear that, and I won't accept it because I support the State of Israel. I believe it's an important ally of ours.
We're limiting our discussion to this one event.
This one event,
It's very likely that the
which is
people in Israel also don't know anything about the USS Liberty. It's the government and the military that have kept this thing open.
But let's not forget
From
about
people.
Phil hanging on the line.
Yeah.
Why don't we
Okay.
take this call?
Phil, you still with us?
Hi, Phil. You're live on the Progress Report. You there, Phil?
I am.
Wow,
What
I
would
could
you
hear-
like to talk
Would you
about?
like to participate? We're welcoming you.
You're
Well,
live
thank
on
you
the air.
guys for taking my call. I just want to thank Mr. McCarthy for bringing this story to light. And he's one of my all-time favorite local Democrats. I can remember back in the 70s when he enlightened me about the Seabrook nuclear power plant with his motto, no nukes. So
jeez.
once again, he brings
Hey,
us
Phil,
a
that was
story
me.
to light.
That wasn't Phil McCarthy.
no, that
Look it up and
was
study.
somehow we get it.
Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Sapienza. I
Thank
appreciate
you very
that.
much for that call and those
Yeah.
nice words.
Well, it's great to see you still active.
Well, I had a
And
duty.
I
I thought.
appreciate your input, and I look up to you politically.
Okay.
And I got one favor to ask, though.
Yeah.
Please, remember my brother Tony when you go to the polls.
Oh, he's in. He's in. He knows that. He
Yeah.
knows that. Yeah. Phil,
Because
all
I
right.
don't want my mother getting upset.
No. All right. Okay, Phil. Thanks for calling.
All right, great show. Thanks,
Okay,
guys.
thanks.
Thanks
Yeah.
for calling,
Thanks
Phil.
for
Appreciate
calling,
it.
Phil. That's a good call. We appreciate it very
And
much.
who wouldn't remember Tony Sapienza, right? I
Yeah,
mean, that's an impossible thing to
That's
do.
Phil.
Yeah.
Phil.
yeah. So here we are. You've talked a little bit about the attack.
Let's put the other picture up just to
Oh,
show.
yeah,
I
let's
mean,
put the
to
other
get an
picture
idea.
up.
This was a serious.
what happened.
Look at it.
Whoa.
This is what happened after.
Now
You
it
can
looks
see
like
you can
the-
see a helicopter landing there, right on the end. That was part of the rescue.
Now it looks more like the Egyptian horse ferry. Right? Before it didn't look like that, but
Yeah, they mistook
made
it for a
look
tramp
like the horse
steamer.
ferry now, but you can still see the big antennas and everything on it. And the pilot said that there was a 15-foot flag, U.S. flag flying.
There were, and I read that too in trying to get ready for the show. The original, of course, it was flying the American flag at the commencement, but apparently that flag very early got shot down. The tip of the mast got shot down. So they raised another flag, a much larger flag, in an effort to identify
They were
themselves.
really extremely heroic, and that's why I'm glad that you guys let me be here.
Yeah, I mean,
People know
there
how
really were individual
heroic
acts
they
of
were,
heroism.
individual
Yeah,
acts of
yeah, yeah.
heroism.
Talk about this to us, Bill. I mean, from the commanding officer all the way down through the ranks, an unbelievable effort to save the ship, which succeeded.
Putting out the fires
Yeah.
while being under fire. I mean,
With
and
a
that's the other
40-foot
thing.
by 20-foot hole in the bow area. Is that right?
No, it was midships.
Midships.
Midships where
Yeah.
the spooks were, yeah.
Yeah.
They knew exactly what they were doing, definitely, you know.
So that was an incredible effort to save
It
the
was.
ship
If I might,
and keep it afloat.
I think Bob knows this, but I don't know if you, Mike, when they gave him the Medal of Honor, it used to be called the Congressional Medal of Honor, highest thing you can get in the military, right? When his was awarded, normally it's done at the White House by the president,
Oh,
right?
sure.
But because of the notoriety and the wanted to continue to cover up and stuff, he got his at the Navy Yard down on Anacostia River. That's where he was awarded his. The same day, a Marine Sergeant or Corporal or something got his at the White House. So the fix was in for the cover-up way, way back, you know. And it continues today. It continues today. And I would like...
Well, they did have a board of inquiry, though, at the
a very
end.
short, a very quick board of inquiry, and if you read any of the transcript on it, it was kind of a stacked deck, you know. But I would like to say this: that as bad as this attack was, and it seems to be never ending for the crew. They have to live with this and fight with this to try to get the voice out, so that they can tell people about it. And it's especially hard in view of the fact that they fought so bravely, and the ship is the most decorated for any single engagement, which of course should not be with your ally. Your engagements, you know.
Yeah.
Well, let's be entirely fair here. As I understand it, the Israelis did apologize and paid some
Immediately.
compensation.
Not immediately, no.
There was an
But
apology
tell us about
radioed
this.
to
What
the
did the
to
Israelis
Tel
do
Aviv.
to make amends for this horrible, devastating attack with so many injuries and loss of life?
What happened in '67? When was Jimmy Carter in president? You can
76.
Huh?
76 to 80.
76 to 80. So it would be at least 10 years later. There was no investigation. There never has been a formal congressional investigation about this at all, period. But I just found out today in skimming the book, it happened under Jimmy Carter's watch, and the settlement was $6 million. $2 million this month, $2 million and $2 million after that.
That was
the settlement.
Third settlement, and that was the settlement for the property damage.
Yeah.
There were three settlements.
Three?
There were settlements for the deceased sailors, which
Oh.
was much larger than that, and then there was another very large settlement for the, families of the deceased sailors. Then there was a large settlement for the wounded and injured sailors, and then the
But it
last
took
of the
10
three-
years, and they had to
Yes.
fight that tooth and
Yes,
nail to
it
try
was-
to get
it was
anything
not-
out of it. It wasn't
it didn't- they were not up front with it, and it did take three installments.
And at the time, Adlai Stevenson and another United States senator actually were making a move to have a formal investigation, and they were crushed, according to the book. They were just absolutely devastated when the word came that it was all over and done. And it's been all over and done and pushed under the table all that time, and continues to be pushed there, you know. So,
But there was an immediate acknowledgement because the Israelis offered to perform rescue operations, but were refused. So they at that
well,
point.
when did they come up with the false identification? I think it's still their position that they thought that
I
was
think
an
that was the-
Egyptian ship.
Yeah, I think that was
I think-
what their inquiry. They had an inquiry as well, and from what I've read, that's what they
still
say that's what
hanging on
caused
that,
it.
yeah.
But they did once they realized. I mean, at some point they realized they had peppered an
Screwed
American
up
ship full of
badly, yeah.
holes.
They screwed
and
up
they
badly, yeah.
notified. I don't think we had an embassy. I think there was a consulate in Tel Aviv, and there was a notification that there was an accidental.
I think there was. I think I read something about that. And then, did that guy come out, the consul, try to get on the ship, and they wouldn't accept him? I think that some of that's ringing true.
Yeah, I
'Cause,
I
they
think
were-
actually I think the Israeli actually offered a helicopter to transport him to the ship.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that was
said,
the
"No,
only.
thanks, we don't like
Yeah,
them.
that was the. But that
we
was,
don't need any more military out here, right? You know.
Yeah, we've had enough of you guys.
Yeah, jeez.
So how many of these sailors are still alive? How many survivors I assume
They have a
that-
very active association. I joined it about a year ago. Haven't gone to any reunions or anything, but they put out quite a newsletter, and they put a publication out, I think quarterly or semi-annually. I gave Bob a copy of it, and they have an annual convention. And this year it's in Norfolk, Virginia, and there are quite a few of them up in Maine because the Navy Security Group had a site up there, Winter Harbor, Maine, and a lot of guys retired up there. But they're all over, all over different places. But there's quite a few of them still alive, The guy in Maine is one of the most active. He's like a minister now and everything, and he's very, very active,
So, you've provided this book, which is something I think people might enjoy. This book, it's still available, is it? This book,
I don't know.
James
I
M.
think
Ennis
I'm going to
Jr.
buy one for the Manchester Library.
Assault
That'd be
on the
my next
Liberty,
thing.
the true story of the Israeli attack on an American intelligence ship. Sounds like it's a really good book. It's got photos and it's got,
He was the officer of the deck at the time of the attack and got blown off the deck.
Yeah.
Bob, and he has tried every which way to get the story out, and they couldn't get any place. So he decided that he would finally write a book about it, and he did. He did write the book, and it's an excellent book. A lot of appendixes that tell you exactly what's happened and so forth, and it is the most authoritative one.
I would think something like this is ripe for a theatrical presentation.
Yeah, I was going to ask,
I mean, this would
has
be-
anybody ever done a movie about this?
No,
or a
I don't
TV
think
show
so.
or
No,
anything?
maybe a YouTube or something like that. That's about. I think
No,
there's.
I mean, this
I
really,
think there are some
the stories
films, but
of heroism.
It is quite a
and
story.
those left
Yeah.
behind, and
I'm
not
glad
to
you guys
mention the
appreciate
political
that. Yeah,
intrigue. This is
yeah. I
a
think it's
real, and the Egyptians are there, although they didn't take part in all this. They have a very major role to play just because they were the antagonist of Israel at the time, and kind of were a bit of a scapegoat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's one theory.
Yeah,
that,
it was thought that the Israelis said that there was a case of mistaken identity. They thought it might be an Egyptian ship. What'd you say?
A horse ferry.
A horse ferry?
Yeah, don't I say horse, right? Horse,
Well, it's,
horse,
hard to
horse
see why
ferry.
they would launch that kind of weaponry on a ferry carrying just horses. I mean, there's going to be a cavalry attack from the sea. I
That
don't
doesn't
know.
make
well,
sense.
but again, there's
doesn't make sense.
circumstances that you have to keep in mind. You had this shelling of this town, and again, we realized that this ship couldn't have done it.
Yeah.
But they're looking for a ship that has shelled
know?
a coastal city. You know what I mean? They're,
There is the fog of war, isn't it? There really is, and this is where I have a debate with Bill, which we may get into. But let's see if we have Alan to contribute to our program.
Hi, Alan.
Hi, Alan. Welcome to the Progress Report. You're on the air with us. Go right ahead.
Yes, for the three of you, I've been a big fan of, I've been following the Liberty thing for years.
Oh, great.
But
Glad to have you
I'd
on.
like to ask the guest, hello?
Yes, you're on.
Go right ahead.
I'd like to ask the guest, there was another incident, and I think it was in May of 2010, where the Turkish vessel, Marmara, was attacked. It was a Turkish boat. It was attacked by Israel, and 9 people were killed. My question to the guest would be, is Israel out of control?
I guess that
I
would
think
be.
I know what he's talking about.
I guess that would be an opinion on my part, right?
Yeah, I
Are you
think I
talking
know
about
that.
the peace activists that were trying to get into Gaza?
Yes, I think he is. Isn't
Yeah.
that right, Alan? That's what you're talking about, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
They hired or commissioned somehow a Turkish flag vessel so that these peace activists could get to Gaza and support the Gazans' resistance to the Israeli pressure on Gaza.
If the question is to me whether I think the Israeli military is a little bit out of control, my answer is yes, I do definitely think so. Not only Israel military, I think the U.S. military is also a little bit out of control.
Does that answer your question, caller?
Yes, sir. Thanks very much. I'm signing off.
Thanks for the
Okay,
call.
well, thanks for the call. It's a very interesting call.
A nice comparison too. It's always interesting
good
to take
point. I hadn't thought
historical
about that, but it's
references
true.
and apply them to more recent events because that's how
Yeah.
you can you better analyze these things. I don't know. I don't mean to be taking sides. I'm really not taking sides, and I definitely don't want to take sides against American heroes, and these guys certainly are.
Well,
but in my reading of it, I just, you know, for every place where you could say, yeah, this was deliberate, I find that, well, there might be another side of the story. So, but of course,
Well-
a good act like
Well,
this. they would do it
you're a lawyer. Lawyers, that's how you guys do it, right? But I'm not a lawyer, so it's not mine. But you're not the only people that feel that way, incidentally. I have a good friend of mine, I told Bob, he's a Navy captain, 4th Stripe. He was in my Russian language class for a year, and he made it almost to the top, as high as you get this year. He retired in Hawaii and everything. And I tried to get him roped into this a little bit. He was in the Navy security group for his career, commanding officer in a couple of places and stuff. And he said exactly the same thing. He said, well, as far as he's concerned, he said, no personal vestige in this thing at all. He said, it's just hearsay as far as he's concerned. And it's one of those things that gets lost in the fog of war. That's one guy, captain,
Fog
right?
of war.
So a guy at the Y, second-class radioman, who was on the Intrepid. I was also on the USS Intrepid, and he was on station as a second-class radioman from Manchester. They told me he was from Manchester. I want to talk to him. Then I meet him years and years later at the Y. I tried to get him interested a little bit in the Liberty and such, how this ship got screwed and all these guys and stuff like that. And he says, must have been in the wrong place at the wrong time. So you're not the only two, and unfortunately,
Well, that's for sure,
everybody
but that's
feels
maybe
that
not
way.
the end
Well,
of the story.
I'm not saying I'm not staking my flag at that position.
No,
I'm
okay.
trying to kind of figure
Yeah,
it out.
well, this is the good
because
step.
I'm coming to it new. You've been
This is
studying
a
it for
good step.
while.
This is a first step. Maybe I'll get you guys after all, right?
You might.
Well, we do. We have another caller.
We have
which
another
is,
call.
is
You're
just
attracting
great.
calls for us tonight. We like that.
Go ahead, caller. You're live on the progress report.
Yeah, join us.
So,
Hi there.
Hi.
Hi, just some food for thought.
Okay.
I'm wondering who invents these pseudonyms like, friendly fire. I mean, don't you think that's a little silly?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
Good point. I hadn't thought about that. It's not very friendly when it's hitting you, is it?
or bombing rate is a
yeah,
surgical strike.
threatening
Is another
dying, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
The
understand.
other question I had is with some, I lost track, but some 60 years in existence, don't you think it's time for us to tell Israel to, stand on their own feet instead of giving them like $350 billion a year in foreign aid? All right. Ask for your thoughts. Bye.
Thanks
Okay.
thanks for your call. And
Well, we should probably do a whole program on Israeli government policy these days, which is, has a lot of support in this country. They have a very powerful political advocacy group in this country called AIPAC,
Do you know what it stands for, AIPAC?
American Israeli Political Action
No,
Committee.
it doesn't. It doesn't stand for Political Action Committee.
Oh, it
Because
doesn't?
if it did, then they'd obviously be helping Israel. But they're a Public Affairs Committee. That's how they got around the idea about
okay.
being political,
Well, I stand
right?
corrected. I
Yeah,
did not know
AIPAC
that.
is Public Affairs Committee. They're very, very smart. In which John F. Kennedy said they should register as a foreign. If you're representing a foreign country, then you should register as that. And it's quite so different. Like I'm from Ireland hundreds of years ago and stuff like that. But when Northern Ireland IRA starts to do something, you can't go join the IRA. You can't even send the IRA any money. You can't contribute anything. Rahm Emanuel is a veteran of the Israeli Defense Forces. You know that, don't you, right? I don't know how's that work out, So I just don't get it. But then somebody said, well, why don't they just become a 51st state? And I think whoever was prime minister at the time said, why would we want to do that? We only get 2 senators if we do that.
I
Well-
heard that joke. I'm not sure that's
I don't
a
think
true historical fact, but I had heard that joke.
The sentiment is
But boy, when
interesting.
Netanyahu came, I'll tell you, those people, some of them I thought they were going to get sucked to the ceiling.
Yeah.
The way they jumped up, clapping and cheering and stuff, right after you told the president off and stuff like that, So,
Well, there's no doubt. that
you ever look at the
Israelis,
contributions of AIPAC
Yeah.
and who gets them
Yeah.
and how much they get?
Yeah.
No, very, very powerful lobby.
They do work hard, though. I have to give them credit for that. I told Bob, there's a couple of books. I happened to meet this guy out in California, and he was a dedicated person. I got 2 Amazon books and as a gift. The opposite of this, written by one of his type, and The 6-Day War by Oren. He's the guy that wasn't he ambassador to the United States, Michael Oren.
Yes, he was.
O-R-E-N, I think
Yep.
he was ambassador. He wrote The 6-Day War. That's what I read about Palestine, how the first time they'd ever stepped in there, the soldiers, the Israeli soldiers, they didn't know where the streets were or anything, but they were happy to have it.
Yeah.
So-
Well, this is where I am, going to make my dissent from what your position is on this, Bill. This was a horrible attack. It was devastating. It should not have happened. But to me, the idea that the Israelis would attack a naval vessel of their most important ally in the world and do it deliberately is just hard to accept. I can't understand why they would do that. I know.
There's a good answer for that. There's a good answer because they could.
Well,
Because they could. They had enough friends in the right places that they got away with it, and they did get away with it.
Was it some sort of an attempt to try to sway American public opinion by blaming the Egyptians, saying, that...
That's one speculation that I've heard,
Is that the grounding for this?
but there was no way that could work. Too many people saw these planes and these torpedo boats and survived to tell the tale.
I don't think they wanted anybody to know their business, and I think it was important enough for them to
So
do
they
that
were, they were
right at the
repelling a
crucial
spy ship.
time.
You think
Right
this
at
was...
the crucial time. They were knocking that thing right out of there and blaming it on the Egyptians and stuff because they did not want us to know what the hell was
So
going on.
this was a military action to
to stop the collection, to stop. We have recordings of all that stuff, right? The Liberty had all kinds of recordings and everything. I mean, I wasn't in the Army, but when I went my lessons at NSA, when an Army tank group starts to form up and stuff, there's a hell of a lot of communications, even before they shoot the first rocket or gun.
Well, we know that's important. They had all that fake communication to throw the Germans off in World War II. They built an entire unit of the armed forces that was cardboard.
I'm reading that right now.
And one of the things they did was they would pump radio chatter out that was nothing. They were making it all up.
Well, to me, the Israeli role in this is horrible and distressing and should not have happened. But to me, the story you're telling, Bill, is equally damning about our own government.
Absolutely.
Our own government's behavior to not protect this ship in the first place, and then not to, fully acknowledge the heroism of these people.
Every member of the Liberty crew that's still
to me is
alive agrees with
damning.
you. They agree with you.
Damning.
They all agree with you. They feel like the government just took a walk on them. Their country took a walk on them.
On that very day, too, because from what I've read, there was a request for another ship to be detached to provide security for this ship before the attack occurred. That request was denied, but they were advised that they had an aircraft carrier with air support 10 minutes away. Now, that battle lasted over 2 hours, the three waves.
Yeah.
So what happened to that 10-minute response time? That's the one thing that I don't understand.
I'd be surprised if that admiral on that ship that they're talking about even knew where the Liberty was or what it was.
Well, they had requested support, so I mean, somebody on the ship knew, and they were advised that they were within 10 minutes flight
planes,
time.
So Saratoga launched planes, right?
But recalled them. Those planes did not engage anybody.
D.C.
Yeah.
Why would they recall planes to come and help this ship?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. I read
How
about
can that
this.
be explained? That we had the USS Saratoga, a major aircraft carrier
That's
group.
one thing that nobody can excuse. Even if they come up with something else like Admiral Mora, there's no way they can get out of that. That was terrible. That was absolutely
I mean, they did
terrible.
put 6 planes in the air, and they called
And
them
they
back.
called them
Now,
back, yeah.
I got to think that those 6 planes, if nothing else,
Would
would
stay
have
there.
made it very clear that
Yeah.
this was an American ship.
Yes, yeah.
And would have stopped the attack, even if they didn't engage the Israelis. They would have pulled back on their own, I would think.
But like I said, they're not in the battle plan. It's not a ship that's in the battle plan. It's they're doing their own thing down there. We don't know much about that. But
Now, Bill, you made an interesting point that I hadn't thought about before you got here tonight, and that is the USS Pueblo is sort of, in a way, a bit of an analogous story. It was an intelligence ship, not a combat ship, principally,
Right.
off the coast of Korea when it was captured.
Yep.
And how is that story played out differently, and what are the significance of those
Well,
differences in your
people
mind?
may be surprised, but when the USS Pueblo got captured right off of North Korea on a cold January day, and they fought to keep the repellers off and so forth. The people
And
on
one
the
man
ship.
died on that ship.
One man, he died during that trying to repel the borders and stuff. So they were all heroic type people too. But there was only about 100 of them, I think, on the Pueblo because of a much smaller ship.
about half
But they
the
were
size.
captured and they were taken to a prison camp in North Korea. I've read the book about it. Lloyd Bucher was the commanding officer and,
And
stuff
I
like
can
that.
remember in the
He
Union
was a
Leader
hero.
every single day, remember the Pueblo, and they would tick
Yeah.
off, 100
and,
days.
and they get beat
101
up in
days.
prison. They were fresh to the guards and stuff like that. They had their pictures taken with their fingers like this, smiling and stuff like that. So we all knew that they were not going along with the whole program. But ultimately, they all come back alive. They all come back alive before Christmas, one particular day. And I don't know who arranged it, Senator Harris or somebody. So somebody negotiated it, and we got everybody back, which was quite different than what happened to the USS Liberty.
And the other difference is, of course, Korea being
Axis,
a
evil-
bad guy. I mean, we didn't have the
evil
axis
Axis,
of
yeah.
evil yet, but
Yeah.
we had just
on our
fought
way.
Korea.
Yeah.
We knew that
Yeah.
they were the bad
You
guys,
know,
and here Israel
we-
is supposedly
we,
not.
We run about 200 or 300 missions a quarter between the Air Force and the Navy. We all want to get our stakes in there, right? We're all going to get our medals, air medals and stuff like that, promotions and everything. We just harass the hell out of the North Korean people up there. North Korea, I would just wish they'd go talk to the guy, bring out a couple baseball players or something. I don't think it would take too much, but the more you ignore a guy like a rat in a corner or something, if you don't
Yeah.
start doing something
Well,
about it.
There's that point.
And we send the whole fleet up there to race hell with them, and they put
Yeah.
pictures on our TV to show it. They're not even there. They're down in the South Pacific someplace or something.
That was,
but we are
one-
building a huge base in Korea. Jeonju and it's the resort area, not best place in Korea. We're building it right to face China. We are just warmongers. We're looking for it all the time. Before I go though, if you want to talk
We
about,
got a few more minutes. Go right ahead.
if you wanted to talk about Israel and Palestine and everything, I couldn't recommend Will Thomas anymore because that guy.
I think he's over there right now, isn't he?
He is he's back from Washington tonight. He's always gone doing something. He's a saint, that guy. He was in Washington for Memorial Day with the Veterans for Peace. And they're going to different places. He's coming back tonight. I think he's leaving the 5th, and he's coming back the 16th
Okay.
from Israel.
Well,
I mean,
we-
he
we-
does know the situation. He stays with the Palestinian people.
I would be glad to welcome him. We've had him as a guest before,
Yeah.
and I know you guys are on the air with your own show,
Yeah.
Veterans for Peace,
Yeah.
for quite a while.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. This was an attack on a U.S. ship by our closest ally in the Middle East, one of our closest allies in the whole world. What if this attack had come from Egypt or Syria? What do you think would have happened?
Well, I think we'd be at war. I think definitely we'd be at war, and we would probably blow up another country like Libya.
Yeah.
But the bigger one, the more important, probably. I think we would have. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It was a
Well,
big
but-
mistake.
That's my guess,
But
too.
you know,
We didn't do it with the Pueblo. We didn't go
oh,
to
you
war
know,
with
you know
Korea
the
over
Pueblo.
the
That's interesting because I
They
read
had a different thing. They didn't shoot it up. They didn't try to
that
sink
kind
it.
of frosts me a bit because we didn't do anything about the Pueblo, and that did tick me off a bit. But then I get some of this military stuff from people that I knew that were in the service who were plugged in more than I am. Or if they see something good once in a while, they send it to me. But with North Korea, it was a hell of a lot more different because you had China would be involved, Korea would be involved, Japan. You could have lit the world on fire if we had done something about North Korea. There were allies involved and everything. So the
And
big
that could
picture,
still happen today.
the big picture that they were worried about was that. That's the reason why in that situation. But in Israel, I don't see why you couldn't just give them a little slap on the wrist or something. We'll do something about it.
Well, do you think that the fact that they did, maybe belatedly, but did issue apologies and did
The
pay
USS
significant
Banner, a sister ship of the Pueblo, commanding officer was a lieutenant, 03, like a captain, Army captain, right? Commanding officer, sitting right off of Vladivostok, right? Right in the open, on surface, right? And the Russians come out to run their operation, right? So the Russians say, get the hell out of our area. We're going to do operations today. We don't want you here. He runs up the flag. I didn't understand you. Would you please repeat, right? I'm telling you, move, So you get on the horn, tell them to move. Finally, and we happened to be listening to the whole thing because we were down here with the thing up, right? So we were listening, and the OTC of the exercise tells him one more time. He said, this is it. You either get out of here or I'm blowing you right out of the water. The captain said, Jesus, what are we going to do? To the XO. The XO said, we go down the wardroom, talk it over. Hey, Spook, come with us. Right, go down the wardroom.
Yeah.
Says the XO, the captain, what am I going to do now? He's a Naval Academy guy, wants to be admiral, right? What am I going to do if this happens? The XO says, no problem. Captain said, what do you mean, no problem? He said, we can't do it. We have to go out to the Sea of Japan. By the time we get back, it'll be all over. We have no problem.
Yeah.
Captain said, phew, that's good.
Hey, Bill, this has been a really interesting hour, and we've had several callers that thought it was interesting too. So that's good, and a tribute to you for bringing this up. And I'm glad you're keeping this issue from disappearing from our consciousness in this.
Well,
country.
again, thank you very much,
Because it
Bob.
should
I
not.
do
We
appreciate
really,
it.
really
I'll
appreciate
still work on you.
Okay, and I'll let you do it.
Okay.
I did want to make one thing, promote one thing. Well, I guess two things. We have the the Manchester City Dems Flag Day event. I think it's June's. God, now I don't remember the day.
Oh, Bob.
Oh well, but
Well,
I
look
do.
at me.
I
I
do
can't bail you out
also
on this
that
one.
this year the annual Progressive Summit, which has usually been at New England College, is going to be right here in Manchester at Manchester Community College on June 17th. You can go to the Granite State Progress website and sign up to participate in that. It's a really great event with a lot of great people and good networking and lots of interesting panels. So keep that in mind if you're free on
June 17th.
June 17th, right here in Manchester at the Community College. And I don't know if the Evans will be back next week with a progress report. Well, Lou D'Alessandro will be. I may be going to the Highway Department hearing on the relocation, rebuild of exit 6 and 7, which, of course, principally affects Ward 12, not only Ward 12. But the hearing on that is next week at the Northwest Elementary School at 6:30 and June 7th. So there you are.
Good hearing to go to. I'll be tied up as well. Maybe
I
I'll
know you-
scoot. Maybe I'll scoot over there after my engagement.
Okay. Thanks, Bill, for coming in. It's been
Okay.
great to have you. This was a very interesting discussion.
Thank you.
And really appreciate your keeping us up to date on this story.
Educational TV on the progress report.
Yep,
Yeah.
good stuff. Next time, folks. Take care. We'll
See
be
you next
back.
week, folks. Well, thanks, guys.